Let's have a quick introduction to ASP.NET in this video session. Now, ASP.NET is a web application development framework which is a subset of .NET framework and a successor of class ASP, which stands for Active Server Pages. We have already discussed that .NET framework is a very wide framework which is used to build a variety of different applications like Windows applications, web applications, console applications, and Windows services, out of which ASP.NET is a subset of the wider .NET framework which is used to build dynamic web applications. Now, if you have been wondering what a framework is, then in short, a framework is nothing but a collection of classes. Now let's understand what a web application is, because in ASP.NET we'll be building our web applications, so we must know what a web application is. So an application accessed by the users using a web browser such as Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, or Mozilla Firefox is a web application. Now, technologies other than ASP.NET which are used for building web applications include PHP, Java, CGI, Ruby on Rails, and Perl. Now let's understand what is the difference between web applications and desktop applications and what are the advantages of web applications over desktop applications. A web application just needs to be installed on the web server, whereas desktop application needs to be installed on every client machine where you need to access it. Now, what are desktop applications? Desktop applications need to be installed on your machine if you wish to access them, and the best example of a desktop application is Microsoft Office. If you wish to access any of the applications from Microsoft Office like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or any other applications from the package, you need to get that installed on your client machine. Only then you will be able to access it. So that is what a desktop application does. Whereas if you need to access a web application, for example Google, so you'll just need to type google.com on your internet browser and you will be very easily able to access that. So a web application does not require any other installation, it only requires an internet connection and a web browser available on the client machine. Now, web applications work under client-server architecture. Now we'll understand client-server architecture in a great detail in a bit. The only requirement in case of web application is a web browser that understands HTML in the client machine, which means that if you need to access a web application, the only thing you will need is a web browser which is installed on your client machine and no other installation. Now there is a very big reason why web applications are generally preferred over desktop application. That's because the maintenance in web applications is much easier as compared to desktop application. Let's understand that. If later you somehow wish to bring certain significant changes in your web application, the only thing you'll need to do is you'll apply all those changes in your web application and deploy your web application on the server, whereas in case of desktop application, you'll need to apply all those changes on all the client machines where your desktop application was installed, which is nearly impossible to do. Therefore, web applications are generally preferred over desktop applications and are much advantageous as compared to desktop applications. Now let's understand the client-server architecture under which all the web applications work. Now, if you have a look at this diagram, these are the different clients, or you can call them as users, which are using the internet to access this particular web application which is deployed over the server, which is IIS, which stands for Internet Information Services, which is a host for hosting ASP.NET web applications. Now, just assume that all these clients wish to access this particular web application which is installed on the server. In that case, all these clients do not require anything to be installed on that client machines. The only thing they require is an internet connection and a web browser available in all their client machines. That's all they need to access this particular web application. Now let's understand how the request and response cycle takes place. So let's flip to a web browser. Let's say Google Chrome. Now as soon as you open the browser, for example, you need to access the web application, say google.com, you'll just type the URL google.com, and as soon as you'll press enter, a GET request is going to get sent to the web server. So what happened is, as soon as you pressed enter on the web browser, what happened is a GET request from this client machine, from my machine, was sent to the web server. In case I was accessing an ASP.NET web application, then the server would have been Internet Information Server, which is IIS. So a GET request was sent from my client machine to the server to get that particular web application, which was google.com. As soon as the server encountered the GET request, it processes the request in whichsoever manner it wishes to do. For example, the server may need to fetch certain data from the database. It will do that, and whatsoever processing it need to do, it will do that and fetch the web application back to the client from where the request came through the internet. This is how the request response cycle happens. The client first sends the request to the server processes the request and sends back the response to the client. Now, one important thing to understand here is your web browser only understands basic HTML and no other higher level programming language, which means that when the request is sent to the web server will process the request and generate the HTML of that particular web application and send that web application to the web browser, because the web browser will only understand basic HTML, and then the client will be able to access that web application. That's all for client-server architecture. We'll understand how websites are made in ASP.NET in Visual Studio 2010 in our next video session.